In this video, I am breaking down 5 of the biggest questions people over 40 wrestle with after an ADHD diagnosis. I'll share what research says about adult diagnosis of ADHD, what I have seen in coaching hundreds of adults with ADHD, and how you can start making sense of this diagnosis late in life. By the end, I hope you walk away with 2 things: clarity about why you struggled the way that you did, and a real sense of what's possible now that you know how your brain works. Let's dive in. So, a late in life diagnosis, to me, it wasn't just a label, it was a mirror of looking at myself and saying, wow, this is where I've come. And then also, where do I want to go next? What is would the next 20, 30 years of my life look like? Especially getting diagnosed at the age of 40, it also comes with a grieving process, right? It also comes with a bit of, some of us sat there and cried for days, some of us got angry. So that grieving process is very much real. So here are the 5 questions that I was mentioning. Why was I missed earlier? What does this change now that I know that my brain works differently? What challenges remain? What do I need to do? What are the different things? What's going to happen now that I know? The question of, am I broken, was a big one, and it's still a big one to many of us. Is it a disability? Is it a superpower? All of that stuff is totally up there for discussion. What about redoing life? Now that I know what I know, do I get a redo? What does this look like going forward? When it comes to the question of why was it missed earlier, here are 4 criterias where I think, based on my research, that are crucial that why your diagnosis was missed earlier on. One could be the flaw in the criteria and research, which I will get into in the next slides. The other is that adaptive strategies and masking, and you mask and you adapt till you hit a tipping point. Another one is the gender bias in the diagnosis of men versus women, where boys were to be mostly diagnosed with ADHD and women flew under the radar. And I'll talk about that in the next few slides. And the last one was life demands. If you're coping and you have all the strategies in place, life demands weren't too much on you, you were rocking it and moving along till life demands changed. So for me, these 4 criterias actually really were important in how and why we were missed when we should have been diagnosed earlier. When I talk about flaws in criteria and research, ADHD criteria were shaped by studies of boys with disruptive behaviors. They researched a bunch of boys and said this is a boy issue. And also research ignored hormones and life stages. For example, with women, which I'll talk about in a second, our hormone fluctuation throughout our journey into our life changes all the time, from PMS to perimenopause to menopause and so forth. So again, if you're coping and you're not noticing your ADHD traits, this again was another reason why this was missed. This third bullet about the failure filter gets me, because I hear from my clients that they've gone to their doctor and the doctor says, you're successful, you're doing great, you have a PhD, you have 2 MBAs and this and that, you don't have ADHD. And to me, that's the problem. This is one of the biggest flaws is, hey, and also you're over 40 or 50. I had one client over 50. Why do you even need a diagnosis anymore? And that, my friends, is one thing that I think the medical system is doing such a disservice is, yes, they're functioning, they're doing the things, but they also want to understand their brain better. And to take that away because they're quote unquote not failing is a miss, I think, in the criteria of the diagnosis, is truly being able to see all the sides of a person and not just put it on because you have high IQ or you've been successful so far in life. ADHD shouldn't be a thing. Finally, the last one is the misdiagnosed due to co-occurring conditions. So I'll give you a personal example on this one. In my early 30s, I was diagnosed with mild depression. And I was diagnosed with mild depression because I didn't know I had ADHD. So every time I was not managing my brain or working with my brain in the way I was supposed to be working with it, I would go into depressive episodes. So ADHD also often is not by itself. it comes with what they call comorbidities. So you could have ADHD and dyslexia, ADHD autism, ADHD depression, or anxiety. Often there is, I call it the cousins of ADHD that are at play. So if the doctors are missing the ADHD and just go to, well, in my case, depression, they're actually missing that root cause of what was actually causing my depression was unmanaged, unattended to ADHD traits. So this is from a flaw and criteria research. These were the 4 key things that I wanted to bring to your attention. There's a lot more that we could talk about, but for now I wanted to bring these 4 to your attention. To continue on with that conversation, why was I missed in earlier? So when we're talking about adaptive strategies and masking, here are a few things. High IQ or strong verbal processing skills can mask ADHD. This one, particularly the high IQ, firsthand, I've experienced this with family members where they're high IQ. And then you sit down and there's a conversation and you can see how hyperactivity and impulsivity of ADHD is kicking in. Now, here's the thing. If you were that gifted child or high IQ, you may have been in environments where the teachers are like, you know what? Johnny has high IQ. Let's just let him work through his struggles because he's smart. He'll figure it out. But what's happening early on in Johnny's life is he's also internalizing this as, wait a second, I have high IQ. I'm really smart. I'm supposed to figure this out. Why am I struggling? So Johnny now turns that into shame, guilt, and internalizing it for himself as I must be broken because I'm supposed to be smart and I'm not just getting this. So you see how this can really actually in the long term have really negative effects on the person and the narrative that they're creating for themselves. Another coping strategy could be external structure that hides your symptoms. So for example, if you went through university and to a bit of a young adulthood and you lived at home the whole time, you have a bit of a structure. You're part of a family where, let's say your parents did give you that structure and routine of go to school, study, your school gave you the structure. Or also, let's say you worked in an environment where it was really structured and you had to follow the rules to a T. That also gives you that baseline till, and in this case, let's talk about the pandemic again, where pandemic really changed the way we showed up to work. And all of a sudden, all of those coping mechanisms, all of those things that we were doing naturally, there was a rhythm for us, is gone. The minute that's gone, your brain goes, holy cow, this is all new to me. There's too many decisions I have to make. There's planning, there's adjustments, things like that. And your ADHD traits come out full blown. So again, if there was structure and routine that was imposed on you, you kind of are coping without really knowing that ADHD was there. For me, that late in life diagnosis, and then also having a baby, that for me, having that baby broke my structure because all of a sudden I was a professional and also a mom, and I just couldn't do all of it all at the same time. I came to a complete standstill in my life, which actually didn't make sense for me at that time. Now, the third one, this is the one that also is near and dear to my heart, and when many of people that I work with, is the over-reliance on stress and adrenaline. So some of us say we work best under stress. We wait till last minute to get things done. And this becomes our rhythm and our go-to. And then till to a point where no longer your body can keep up with you and your body crashes and says, enough is enough. I can't keep doing this adrenaline and cortisol producing activities over and over. So again, as we age, the same vessel is not the same vessel when we were in our 20s and 30s and over 40s. Your body's shifting, things are happening, things are changing, and keeping up with that intense adrenaline and cortisol is just not sustainable. So again, this becomes another reason why it could have been missed before, and now it's showing its colors. Now, let's talk about this one, the gender bias. The hormonal changes amplify with ADHD symptoms in women. Now, here's the thing, because as I mentioned, the whole criteria was built around boys with ADHD, and all the research and everything was done with boys. And thank goodness, even in the last few years, there is more conversations about women with ADHD and hormonal fluctuation that is coming up, which is so amazing. For me, when I'm having these conversations with my clients, one of the things I'm always asking is, hey, female, hormones, where are you at in your menstrual cycle? Where are you at in your changes in hormones and perimenopause and menopause? And this is truly a conversation that we all need to have out loud publicly more often than not. And I get really passionate about this one because some of these women, again, they've been coping, they've been coasting, and all of a sudden perimenopause hits, and all of a sudden you feel like you're going to lose your mind. You're getting brain fog, things are changing for you, your estrogen levels are dropping, your progesterone levels are dropping. So it's really important to, by the way, ADHD was there all along, and now it's been amplified even more. On the second point, where I talk about two-phase onset in females, this was actually a conversation that I had with Dr. Russell Barkley, who talks about sometimes with women in childhood, nothing happens with their ADHD. They're moving along, chugging along, things are happening. And then puberty hits. Puberty hits, and here we are with ADHD. And their brain kind of starts to show all the traits and it gets amplified. So with women, again, as their hormonal changes happen, this is another thing to take into consideration. So if you were a child that you didn't show any symptoms and then all of a sudden puberty kicked your butt, here's another reason. And finally, diagnosis catch up by adulthood. So it goes in the same pattern here, where with women, they coasted, they coped, did the best they could. And then all of a sudden in adulthood, it's really further amplified. So I just wanted to cover that women and ADHD side because it's not often talked about. It is being talked about more and more these days. There's more research. And if you are a female listening to this conversation, watching this video, I want you to please have a conversation with your doctor about your biology and ADHD that go hand in hand, and it's a conversation to be had. All right. The fourth thing that could have led to why your diagnosis was missed is the life demands. Workplace complexity could expose the deficits. Are we in an environment that is aligned to our strengths as individuals? So when we change jobs, that complexity of work, where in one place you could do it with your eyes closed, in another place, things are different dynamics, different work culture, that adapting comes with a bit of heavy lifting. So it's important also to pay attention to that is, did you recently change your job and all of a sudden everything's different? How is that supporting you? And in times where it's not supporting you, your ADHD does act out and wants to show its true traits a lot more. Parenting and caregiving magnifies executive functioning load. And again, I mentioned this as a late in life mom, that really affected me because the front of our brain, the CEO of our brain for decision-making, problem solving, time management, emotional regulation, all of that went out the door. I was not able to tap into any of those functioning that every person should actually have access to. So again, for those that are new parents, or they've been parents for a while and now things are getting complicated, you got teens, you got all this other stuff happening, your ADHD may start acting out, and this is part of it too. So another one, aging. And let's just say it for what it is. It's not just a number. Things are changing. And it's to pay attention to your body. What does my brain need now at the age of, I'm almost 50? What do I need now at 50? What will my brain need? What do I need to do to set myself up for success in my 60s and 70s and so forth? And really being honest with that. And I think it's important to meet ourselves where we're at. Again, this is another one that I feel like as we age and go through this, it's important to pay attention to that. And there is one research that I came across that said people with ADHD, we are truly young at heart. You could be in your 60s and 70s and you still feel like you're in your 20s. There's this energy, this zest for life that we have. And it's true. But also we need to pay attention to what's happening right now. What's the reality of right now in my life? And what does my brain need in order to go forward? Now that we talked about why were you missed in your earlier diagnosis, let's talk about what changes with the diagnosis. I think for me, there's three things at play. The validation and relief that, wow, there is a reason why I act the way I do. And part of it is because of my brain wiring. And that permission to really accept myself for who I am, I think it's pretty freeing. Some of us go through that journey a lot slower. Some of us ramp up and holy cow, all right, here we go. I'm going to stop blaming myself. Now, what do I do and how to do it, which we'll talk about in a second. But it's important that relief of it finally freaking makes sense, right? So that's one thing that changes with that diagnosis. Another is access to evidence-based treatment. So what do I mean by this? When it comes to ADHD and medication, that is one treatment that is available to us. And for me, I went through a few different meds and none of them worked for me. It just didn't sit with the way I metabolize medication. So it wasn't an option for me. But for those of you that want to explore that route, that is available to you. Also, you now can have a different conversation with your therapist if you're going through therapy, and having that lens of there is nuances when it comes to therapy and ADHD and modalities like cognitive behavior therapy, dialectical behavior therapy. These are some of the things that really work with those with ADHD. But also, having said that, if your ADHD comes with cousins like autism, sometimes cognitive behavior therapy might not be the right tool for somebody with ADHD and autism. And these are some of the things that I'm sharing is based on my research, conversations with individuals and also therapists where I've seen how they're navigating this. So we talked about therapy, we talked about medication, your eating habits, your diet, the way you're eating, what are you putting into your body and how is that affecting your brain? That becomes so much more important. Me and my omegas, we have a love-hate relationship. I'll take them for a week and then I forget to take them and then I come back. One thing that's always in my pantry of supplements is my vitamin D. I do not do without my vitamin D, and I'm not suggesting that you do the same. Again, I'm not giving advice here. I'm just sharing what my regimen looks like, and I want you to please talk to your doctor about it. But it's paying attention to what we put in our body. The other avenue on treatment is also coaching and having a conversation with a trained coach, where coaching becomes another modality into navigating ADHD. This is where my sweet spot is. As a trained coach, we have been trained to work a certain way with our clientele in order to support them in better understanding of their brain, building new habits, partnering with them in really shaping what their career could look like, what their life changes could look like. So having that thinking partner really also helps. So having access now to intentional, I don't want to say treatment, but navigation of your ADHD is also important. Third, it's a new lens of here's what happened in my past and great. These are the lessons I want to take from it. And then here's how I want to do my future. So that conversation is even that much more important to be had with a therapist, with a professional, to really what's next for me, right? Knowing that this is how your brain works. So this is what, for me, gave me the kind of a framework around how I navigate through the diagnosis, if you will. Let's be frank and say there are challenges that are going to continue to exist. So for example, executive functioning. I talked about this. This is the CEO of your brain. It's behind your forehead. It's called the prefrontal cortex. Its job is to be the CEO of your brain. And so there are going to be challenges with time management, organization, working memory, task initiation. Now, here's the thing. Not all of us with ADHD will have these impairments. Some of us may be really good at time management. Some of us may be really good at task initiation and suck at working memory. So it changes per person. But knowing that there may be impairments in our executive functioning is important. And then it's knowing what yours look like and then how do you address it. And this is where you bring on the resources to support you with. When we talk about high risk and ADHD, unmanaged ADHD, truly this section is a little bit of a doom and gloom, but I do want to mention it. Rate of self-harm is really big with those with ADHD. I will link to some of these resources that I'm talking about so you can do it in depth, read yourself. Substance misuse is in there. Accidents, car accidents, vehicle accidents. I know a few of my colleagues who They were daydreaming and then didn't know where they were going, and all of a sudden they crashed into a pole. I'm being extra here, but honestly, I've heard stories like that where they're in their thoughts and there's been an accident because they weren't paying attention. Shorter life expectancy, there was a research that was done on this. I don't want to go into the details of it because I don't want to turn this presentation into doom and gloom, but I will link into it. It's an article about those with ADHD actually, if unmanaged, if not paying attention, there is a shorter life expectancy because look at all these other high risk things, right? That could come into play. And I'm not saying all of us have short life expectancy, but at the same time, it's something to be paid attention to. Career. This is another one that will remain a challenge until we decide to do something about it. That being able to reevaluate, are you in the right career? Does the career align to who you are? At what point do you leave? How do you strategically leave? How do you strategically plant your next career? All that stuff is important. And this is my sweet spot. This is the conversations I have on a daily basis with adults with ADHD, is how do we navigate a career for you that it goes from a challenge to here's what we're doing about it, and here's how we're going to continually assess it and do it differently. And finally, relationships. Unfortunately, higher risk of divorce is very much prevalent in our community. However, I do have clients that I talk to that have been in marriages for 20, 30 years. So there is hope, but also it's knowing what support system do we need to have around us to be able to find the right partner that matches with us. And then how do we move forward in that relationship? Here's the other question that comes up. Am I broken? No, my friend, you are not broken. It's the way your brain operates. It's the way your brain is wired. And it's knowing that once I understand how my brain operates, I can create my own user manual for my brain. So it's not a moral failure. It's just nobody ever gave us a handbook and said, hey, here's how your brain works. Off you go. And it's also, it comes with strengths. I don't call ADHD a superpower because you saw in the past slides, there are deficits. There are things that could be really crippling if you have ADHD. But at the same time, there are strengths like creativity, outside the box thinking, energy for those of us that are hyperactive. Oof, some of us can go all day, right? Empathy, leadership. We have some really awesome strengths that are available to us if we know how to tap into them strategically. And forgiveness to repair. Now, here's the thing. Healing, I think it needs to be done. There needs to be some healing around, wow, I had no idea this is this, and I need to have this conversation with somebody. And this is the part I encourage you to do, have a dialogue with a professional that can hold that space for you to process this out loud so that you don't stay with that narrative of I am broken. Or remember I talked about the person with the high IQ and all of a sudden they're internalizing and shaming for who they are. This is that person that says, actually, the hell with it. I have a high IQ and now creating a different self-identity for myself and creating a structure that makes sense for me. So finally, do I get a second chance at this? So here's what I say to this. You don't get a redo, but going forward, you get to make intentional choices and intentional successes in your life. This is the part that I want you to pay attention to, please, is that we're able to then really create realistic expectations, time frames that make sense for us. And it's not about keeping up with the Joneses. It's about what does it make sense for me right now? I want you to sit down and slow down because some of us like go all in, make all sorts of changes, crash and burn again and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So I don't want you to do that. I want you to prioritize which pieces you want to rewrite and what part is the most impactful right now. So for me in the beginning, my rewrite was my physical health. And it took precedence for a few months. Really prioritize one bit at a time. Which part of your life do you want to pay complete attention to and then move on to the next piece? So you shouldn't do all of this redo all at the same time. And the last point about pivots late in life, I'm actually loving this pivot in my late in life because to me, it's I am now fully able to see all the possibilities and then decide what parts are mine, what parts are imposed on me, and what parts are other people's that I don't want to keep up with. So here's this reinvention framework that I like to leave you with. So we go from knowing to curiosity. And it's really important, that question of what if there's more to me than I thought there was? And sitting with that for a bit. And then being reasonable with it and see what parts of it you want to activate. And reinvention comes through possibilities. The diagnosis is in the end. It's actually great. Now, what's possible? What's in front of me that I haven't had a chance to look at differently? And finally, I want you to lean into wonder. When we lean into wonder and curiosity, judgment, which we've lived with for so long, gets a little bit quieter, actually a lot quieter. So asking yourself, what if the story I've been telling myself isn't the only one? What else is possible now that I know what's going on with me, and especially with my brain?